So 150 billion pounds, 150 billion pounds of food.
It's about 75 million tons.
That is just crazy. One thing around this is probably for like some people out there who say, "What do I care about food waste? You know, why do I can buy all my food in the grocery store. I don't need to care about food waste." Why should people care about this problem?
Ooh. All right, well, we're gonna have to get a little philosophical here, I think, because that's a
Shianan is
component of
going to
this.
bring us back to the technical side.
Yes, I'm the
She's
practical person
you're the
here. I have more specific question to ask, but yes,
I like talking both. I'm happy to hit both sides of it. But I think at the end of the day, like this comes down to actually taking action to express care for the world around you, right? Like, and there's a couple different angles here, and I'll be candid when working in development, when I'm approaching a funder, it's incumbent upon me to understand their motivations. And for some of our funders, the motivation is they just really hate the idea that there's all this food being wasted and there's people in our community that don't have enough food to eat,
I think
right? And for me,
that's a
that's a
good
great
point.
reason.
Yeah,
That's a great place to
that's
start.
yeah, yeah. I don't think that's very philosophical. That's just the truth, you know.
Well, although I'd push back on that a little bit and say that I am, as someone who grew up like utilizing food banks myself, right? Um, and not to get too political with it, but like there are a lot of people in our country that really think that your number one priority should always be to take care of yourself, right? And I think that's really unfortunate. I think that's really unfortunate, and I think that we can and should do better. But I would also say that like the other part of it is when this food goes into the landfill, creates methane, which is the most potent of the greenhouse gases. You guys know this, right? Like, and I don't care. Like, and let's acknowledge there's still a lot of people out there that still don't think climate change isn't real. I am not one of them. But I think there's a third argument to be made here. So if the idea of children not having enough food to eat doesn't stir something in you, first of all, you need to get your head looked at. And maybe you're still a climate skeptic. Fine. How about this? Let's take a really capitalistic approach to this. If you're a real capitalist, you should be furious at the level of waste. This is at its core a wildly inefficient process, right? In what other context would we be comfortable with almost 40% of all the product that is produced just ending up in the garbage can? What good capitalistic business owner would ever allow that to happen under their watch? And it's been really interesting actually to see in some areas that that's actually been the angle that's been taken, where when the social service slash environmentalist kind of angle doesn't work, we can simply just say this is a dumb system and it's not working.
that's that's my that's my kind of point of view. Like if you really think about it, I grew up being educated that you need to make everything efficient, like looking at what you put into the system and what you get out of the system. If you're not even like we're talking about almost half of the food go to waste and is unacceptable. And I also want to follow up on this. So I also have been thinking about the education system or even just like your um, upbringing, like how as a kid how much you learned about like not wasting your food, finishing like everything on your plate. I think that's like what do you think? Because so like let me explain it a little bit more. So I've seen stories on your website, like parents take their children to do the volunteering, like it's like as a after school activity. I think this is just wonderful because you really want to start early in the child education to like nurturing that how do you say, nurturing that thought or like even principle. So do you have any like models to promote this kind of activity with parents, like with schools even? Like what are your thoughts on this?
So we actually do programs in a number of schools, and they look like a couple different things. One that I think is really cool, and we're not, and just to be clear, we're not the only ones doing this. There's a number of places doing this. Sometimes it's funded by districts, sometimes it's organizations like ours. But one that I really like is called a share table. And I don't know the last time either of you were in a like public school cafeteria. Um, but a lot of the food that comes in there, that comes like out of that kitchen, is prepackaged food, right? It's like it's a yogurt or like a cookie that's in a package, or a milk or whatever. And one of the things that we've had some success with, varied success, I would say, but is we do these things called share tables. So I want you to imagine like a bunch of little kids, they're all running around the cafeteria, and they've got that muffin that they're not going to eat. And it's prepackaged, right? So it's sanitary. And they go, I'm not going to eat this muffin. Normally, just goes in the garbage.
That's just,
which sucks.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So we create these share tables, and around that we provide a little bit of education. So the share table is a space where that kid can go, I'm not going to eat this muffin. And they bring it over and they can put it on the table. And any other kid that's in that lunchroom can grab that muffin if they need it. They want an extra muffin to eat, right? And I love that for two reasons. One is that my numbers might be a little rusty, but I believe it works out to about 1 in 10 kids are food insecure, which is awful, which is just categorically awful. But it's also not something that we like talk about a lot, and we don't talk about it a lot with kids. And the thing that we as grown-ups forget really quickly is like, when you're a kid, you are so much nicer than we are as adults. You care about people and things in ways that we just like kind of, I feel like, lose the ability to a certain point. And I love educating kids about this because, one, it's important for them to know that like not every kid that they are sitting next to in the lunchroom has the same access to resources that they do. And like, as that kid, I was that kid who had like the different colored ticket to get my lunch, right? Like free or reduced lunch type of thing, right? And I remember there was like shame around that, right? The ticket I had was a different color, and people would look at it, and I didn't necessarily understand, particularly when I was younger, what was different about it, but I knew that it wasn't good, right? So the more we educate kids about this, there's two big wins here. The first is that like they start to get a better understanding of food waste, food insecurity, the intersection of the two. But the second, and I would argue maybe the most important part, is helping them develop empathy, right? And to recognize that like other people who in some cases look just like them, in some cases don't, but are literally going to the same school, living in the same town as you, and don't have enough food to eat.
And that goes back to like a comment you made earlier about community. And I know you were engaged with community a lot. Looking through your CV, I'm pretty impressed. But I feel that without that empathy or compassion component, there are a lot of people, as you said, or there are people in this country, as you said, that are that think that you should be responsible for your own faith without any help. And I think I honestly, I don't know if you agree with this, but I honestly think that nothing ever was accomplished on a larger level if you're just doing everything on your own. You always need people to help you on the way. So and I feel I feel that compassion part in education is really critical, for kids to have. And food waste and food loss as it should be seen as like a really big problem we have, but it's also like an opportunity for stuff like this. It's an opportunity to educate people. It's an opportunity to do a lot of things, really, like on not just this level. So I just wanted to get this out there because you mentioned it earlier, and I feel like we are also not a climate change denial channel. So
I don't get that sense. I
yeah,
don't get that sense. But
yeah,
if we're gonna do something about it though, and I would argue this goes to any real problem. Like
yeah,
one of the first things you have to do is acknowledge whoever it is out there that thinks that you're totally wrong,
yeah.
what
Oh
they
yeah.
think, because they've ultimately got to. They're either going to be a part of the solution or they're part of the problem,
I
right?
agree.
And
Yeah,
the last thing I did want to add about kids, and this is actually one of my favorite parts, and a lot of my career in the nonprofit world has actually been in youth development facing organizations. So I've been working with kids. Gosh, one of my first jobs when I got out of the army was as a kindergarten teacher.
right.
You know,
Right.
and so I've worked with kids in a variety of contexts. And one of my favorite parts is when a kid learns something like that. When they learn, you know, to pick up litter off the ground, right? One of the most awesome things that you see them do is then when they see their parents or the other like grown-ups in their lives. I love this about kids. They'll be like, "Hey, how come you're not picking that up?"
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah,
Like, and you know, so and when when they see mom, you know, at the grocery store, or you know, she's throwing out a bunch of veggies or whatever, they're like, "Mom, like, you know, you could compost that.
right.
I learned about that at school, right?" Like, and I love the way that kids can kind of nudge people along in that way, and they kind of keep us honest in that way. And like, what do you say to your kid when your kid's like, "Hey, mom, like, there's actually a program where we could bring that food to,"
Yep.
you know, like, what do you say? And I love that they become like these little mini ambassadors
Right.
for making the world better.
Right.
And I just think that's like,
That's
so
wonderful.
potent. Helps us, like I said, helps us stay
Yeah.
accountable.
Climate change. So you mentioned it, so we're gonna have to talk about it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So you know, there's a lot of climate. How do I say this the best way
You better
without
be
being
careful how you
offensive?
say
You know?
it. I know exactly.
So there's a lot of so if I there are a lot of people who are very loud. I don't think it's the majority of people really, but it's a good portion of people who listen to folks that do have a wrong understanding or do want to have a wrong understanding of the science behind climate change. You know, so and those people unfortunately have a very loud voice and for a really long time, especially in this country, um, and that transcends in policies already in a lot of states. You know, so and so you know, on the other hand, you have also the problem with like the real problem of like having food waste and everything. But if that argument is taking out of the equation, you know, do you think it's going to be in the way of developing those like statewide or nationwide policies that are needed to and you don't have to answer this question, but I'm very curious because I you know I started also my own YouTube channel like a couple of months ago, and I'm with the aim to debunk some of the climate science denialism,
Sure.
and there's a lot more out there than I thought it is. I thought it's probably just like one person, but it's a lot. Oh my god, it's really a lot. So and it's very tricky because some people say this is some people say this is not one of the questions on our script. So, but some people like say on the one hand we need science-based information, but then on the other hand they say everything that all the scientists say about climate change or you know, global warming or ocean acidification or whatever you name it is wrong. You know, so I don't.
Yeah.
You know, so that those if so those policies might be very it might be dangerous to enact those policies if you really want to solve the food rescue problem, because you know the argument of like methane will not work anymore because you know people will think it's just a scam or whatever, you know. So yeah, what's your thought about that?
So, okay, so a number of years ago, I had the fortune of getting to teach a class. The original like area that I taught in was actually political science, and I ended up getting to teach a brief course on conspiracy theories. I was really, I was really interested.
You're my
in, like,
man.
why?
Yeah.
Why do people why do people attach themselves to these ideas, right? And I've become really interested more recently in like what are some of the attributes that make people more inclined to think that way?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I think climate change is a little bit different, right? I actually think about like, so if you look at like a lot of the arguments that the politicians make around when they're talking about like opposing, things that will help the environment, what's the number one argument that they're making? What's it almost exclusively rooted in? 9 times out of 10.
I don't know, what is it?
Oh,
I mean,
it's
typically
like a
typically they
see
say
that?
it's cost money. It's like in the way of economic development. That's basically what they say. Yeah.
So they're literally going, yeah, and like, and you're hearing even more conservatives say now, like, no, like, yeah, like we know that polluting is bad, but we can't do that at the cost
Right.
of jobs, at the cost of GDP, at the cost of growth, right?
Right.
And so I would say, so to what you posed, I would say sort of 2 things, like, and like I sort of alluded to before, like I think when you really want to solve a problem, the first thing you need to understand is the people who disagree with you and what their motivations are, because when you can hollow those out, it really you really knock down some barriers. So I would say
Right.
2 things. Like, one, I think that like currently we missed the mark in a lot of ways on articulating the economic opportunities that come from addressing climate change.
Agreed.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, a buddy of mine many years ago worked for a political campaign that I can't say who it was, but they were working on this whole plan that ended up getting tossed out to utilize on the ground infrastructure that already exists in West Virginia. So think about like all the coal mining that's going there. You've got all these people that had worked in these coal mines. They know how to use specialized equipment. There's all these railroad tracks, right, to transport all the
Mhm.
coal. And they're like, you know what else you can do with specialized equipment in those? You can build, ship, and manufacture wind turbines, right? And you could give a bunch of these people good paying jobs in the sort of green economy, that kind of thing, right? And and I don't think we do a great job of making that case,
Agreed.
right?
Yeah.
Because I don't necessarily think you're going to convince somebody who's already convinced themselves that like climate change is a hoax, that it's not. But I think if you can make a compelling economic argument that complements that, I think then you can open up an opportunity.
True.
Right? There's
Yeah.
a reason that we're seeing all these venture capital firms that are not like progressive, super liberal
No,
entities
not at all.
investing
Yeah.
in green energy
Yeah.
because they know it's where the money is,
Yeah.
right? So I think I guess my short answer is figure out what it is that's making people feel that way and get to the root of that. And I will say the more cynical part of me also would say that if you look at the demographics around the people that espouse those views, they're getting older and older.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And in the not too distant future, they're not going to be the ones
Right.
making the decisions anymore. And one thing that we know about Gen Z, for example, I'm an elder millennial myself,
Mhm.
but one of the things that we know about Gen Z is even conservative Gen Z folks believe in climate change and
True.
believe that it needs to be addressed and believe that there's huge economic opportunity. So part of me is sitting there going, let's do as much as we can now. But some of this is in my mind like a waiting game of just getting these old fogies out of the way who are currently prioritizing, their stock portfolios over, the world that they're going to leave behind.
True.
Which
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
that's kind of morbid.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you 100%. I feel like that's a really big portion of the equation. But the scientist in me is also like, there's another part to this where people actively either lie about data or misinterpret data in a way that, most people don't look this up. They just listen to somebody, so it's like, I feel like taking out those arguments and saying, what this guy is saying or what this person is saying is actually wrong because this is what the data. I give you an example. For example, some of the climate change, some of those conspiracy or science denial kind of things say that the planet gets greener and more CO2 will lead to higher crop levels and that we already see more yield in the fields, And they're very serious about it. And a lot of people listen only to that. And they back this up with data. and it's a mixed bag. So they back it up with data. They misinterpret the data in the first place. So there are data, but they don't show what they say, and then they just take that as a base for the rest of like their own. The rest is all a scam because this is what really is happening, and taking out the wind of that, I think, is also part of that equation. At least I feel I'm getting pretty upset if somebody like says science is important and then they interpret and the science wrong and just especially if they have a big audience, if they have millions of followers, or if they're commentators on podcasts or whatever, so that reaches a lot of people, So, anyways, my 2 cents.
No, and I totally agree. And unfortunately, there's no shortage of those folks. But I still would say though that like I really do think that if we can take sort of a two-prong approach
Agreed.
of really making a strong case for the economic opportunities, because that's at the end of the day, even the most climate skeptic person in the world still likes money.
Yeah.
And if you can make a really good argument, I think, that strong economic case. And it's interesting. I've seen quite a few more conservative states, like very, very red states, pass some really interesting legislation in recent years with an exclusively economic-driven motivation behind it.
Right.
And I'll admit that gives me hope. And again, the other part that gives me hope is just that we are the next generation. I think does get this in a way that even people my age in some cases don't, and they better, because they're the ones that are going to inherit they're the ones that are going to inherit the problems,
right?
The worst of it anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. All right, cool. We're completely off track.
No worries.
Let's go back to food rescue. Oh, you know what? I would like to talk a little bit about your background, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah. Are you okay with that? Do you want to? Is it too philosophical for you?
No. Please.
All right. So I think it's you have a very interesting career because you were in the military, you did community work a lot, you worked a lot with NGOs, you're teaching at a university, even about conspiracy theories, which I didn't know before you mentioned it. But so what was driving you into this direction? Is this just randomly? It doesn't look random. It looks like you're really interested in youth development, community work through your entire career. This is what you're doing now. It's very involved with community. So what is driving you into this direction?
It's a good question. Talk about this with my therapist all the time. But I think at the end of the day, so I alluded earlier to the fact that like growing up, like things were kind of tough, right? And we didn't have very much money, and I was very like aware of that, I very strongly understood sort of where we fell in the pecking order in the world, and I think for as long as I've sort of had an awareness of it, I've always sort of been a like rooting for the underdog person, and I am not someone who joined the military out of like patriotic fervor. I joined the military because I was going through some pretty crazy stuff in my life at the time, and I needed like a big change. Sure. But one of the things I will say is that when I came out of the military, that did kind of rewire the way I thought about service. And I think honestly kind of came out with an idea that I just think that it's really important that we put more good into the world than we take out of it. And that's not always easy, and not everyone always has the privilege to do that. But, to be really candid, like I'm a educated, straight white guy approaching middle age. There's a lot of privilege that comes with that. And
I agree. Yeah.
So I really enjoy working with kids. They're the next generation. That's something that has always really called to me. That's why I was a teacher, right when I got out of the military, and then worked, in quite a few, organizations that were youth facing. Last year, when I decided to kind of move on from that and sort of tackle something a little bit different, I'm not a doctor. I can't heal people. I'm not an engineer. I can't design cool technology to fix things. But as funny as it sounds, I've figured out that I'm pretty good at raising money. And so while I can't necessarily be the person, fixing the stuff, I can help the people that are get the resources that they need to do more of it. And I think the more of that work that we can do, where we like respect the communities that we're trying to help and engage with folks as partners and try to like inject some real equity into the world, I think that's just really important. And it's exhausting. And I'm sure I screw it up more often than I get it right. But like at the end of the day, I was taught as a young person, as a kid. I actually went to this fantastic summer camp up in New Hampshire, which is one of the places I worked at for a long time too. It's where I actually learned about development and stuff. I learned there that like if you see a piece of litter on the ground, you pick it up. It doesn't matter if anybody's watching. You do the right thing. And then I spent a bunch of years teaching kids to do that, and it really wore on me. It really sort of imparted upon me that like I had no business telling those kids to do that if I wasn't doing it myself. So I just try to lead by example, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question at all. But,
no, that's
it's very inspiring.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, it's very impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think I think that story you should tell that more often because it's a pretty inspiring story to me, at least it is. I feel like
thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah, no, because we're both immigrants. We're not from the United States. We grew up in different countries, and to me, so for me, I grew up in Germany. So and you can talk about China then, but so to me, it was when I came to this country, I realized how much higher community, like the priority of community that that in Germany we don't have that much of a community sense as Americans. And I think from a philosophical point of view, but I think like there are like two sides. There's like one side like you really, if you don't have money in this country or if you're like poor, you're screwed. You don't have a lot of opportunity, and it's really hard to dig you out of that hole. It's a very, very tough to go from to move in the classes. It is very rough. It is very, very tough in this country. Yeah. But then on the other side, to counterbalance this, you really do need community. You rely on community to like counterbalance all that a little bit, and that's kind of like when I got into this country, I always had a job. I was very, my family doesn't have a lot of money, I didn't come with any money here, but at least I had a job. So I got very, very lucky and again, white, straight, middle-aged man, so kind of like, comes with a lot of privilege too. So, but I realized that as when I got here, that community plays a bigger role, and I find that beautiful. And if I hear stories like yours, that's a very beautiful story. I think you should really tell this story more often. This is a very cool story. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, yes. I don't have a lot of background. I'm from China. We do have community, but I think what moves me is that it's a different kind of community. In China, we're like, family based. You pretty tight with your family members, but then outside your family it's not common. Like here, like you have this, like that's why I'm like so interested in volunteer, like your work that you're doing with food recovery is like, it's almost like strangers coming together and form, not like, it's like you like people that share similar value that come together and work on something that is very important to the world. I think that's something I learned from here after I came to the States. I'm pretty young in my career, so I don't have, I'm still figuring out, but I think it really like little things matter, like like what James you just mentioned, like teaching the kid. I think it's not only like kid, if like everybody has a little kid inside of themselves. Like so if I see a person like picking the litter off the ground, it inspires me too. Like I would follow. So I think, yeah, I agree with Mark. You should tell your story more often. Like it's just wonderful.
I appreciate you both sharing that. And one thing I will say, like, is specifically to Food Rescue US, I think one of the things that like really stuck out to me early on was I did this rescue. It's actually one of the ones I've done a few times. Again, it's from Fairfield University, and it's to this. The rescue is to this church-run sober living house. It's like like a residential sober house where these folks live, and in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And one of the things I thought was really cool was like that when we talk about things like food insecurity, we usually talk about like statistics, 1 in 10 kids and this percentage of the population and how much money we spend on it and whatever. And I think sometimes we forget that it's like people, that it's like an actual person. It's a single mom with 2 kids who's working her butt off, 3 jobs, she's trying to keep, a roof over her head,
Right.
food in her kids' bellies, and like those people aren't statistics, and one of the things I love about the work that our volunteers do and that we do as an organization is that it does give folks the opportunity to humanize these other people, right? And like, and I would say too, like for all those people that are out there that are, you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and whatever, that is a really easy thing to say until you actually see those people. And you remember
Agreed.
that they are moms and dads and
Agreed.
brothers and sisters, daughters and sons, right? And when you put a face to that challenge, to that like big systemic problem, it makes it a lot harder to look away. And so one of the things I'm really proud of is that I think and not always, but in many areas of our work, folks have the opportunity to step outside of their like comfort zone and sort of see how folks that live a much different life than them live. And we're also giving them an opportunity to like do something good about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that like I wish I had statistics around that. I wish I had like hard metrics that I could use, because I bet I could raise $1 bajillion if I could metricize that in one way or the other. But that's the sort of like intangible part, like the storytelling part of this that we try to do a lot of at Food Rescue US. And sometimes that's just asking people to tell that story.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at our Instagram and stuff, it's full of videos of volunteers just talking about like why they do this, and I think that's really potent. I think that's really, and it's such an important part of our work that does not neatly turn into, carbon emission reduction and pounds of food and methane and whatever. But I think it's just as important part of the conversation.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, like why scroll through your website, I found it's very informational, and there's also a lot of storytelling on your website. I think that's just great, because you really learn a lot. It's just not staring at the numbers, you see the faces. So yeah, I think you guys are doing great work. It's really impressive.
I really appreciate that. Has been like a huge focus. Our marketing manager, Jenna Von Elling, who's just like another one of those people that I work with that I'm just grateful to work with every day. That's something that she and I have like really focused our efforts on since starting to work together. And it's been really cool to see the impact that it's had on people.
Yeah, because that's a value that this brings to people, So I like to the people who get the food, but also to the people who are volunteering. That's a big value for their time. So. I do have a couple of other questions. I'm not sure where we're going to start. All right. Well, so as a Star Trek fan, I'm going to have to bring it up because we're running out of time. So, uh, so you said, well, I do want to say this again, but like what 1.5 billion tons of food are going uneaten every year. Is that what you said?
No, 150 billion.
150 billion.
Oh,
150
sorry, 150 billion pounds. 150
pounds.
billion
Oh, okay.
pounds
Yeah. Okay.
of
150
food
billion pounds.
are, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Still, that's quite a lot of that. I mean, 150 billion pounds. How many tons are those? Do you know that? No,
I don't do math.
you don't do
very
math.
well, no.
So 150 billion pounds. Pounds. 150 billion pounds of food.
It's about 75 million tons.
That is just crazy. That is just crazy. So how much? So two things. So how much do you think out of those? How much do you think out of those 150 billion tons is Food Rescue US like rescuing? How do they? How much do they shave off?
So last year,
Yeah,
we rescued 38 million pounds of food.
38 million pounds.
And it's funny because like 38 million on
That's
its
a lot.
own is a huge number.
That's a
right?
lot. Yeah,
But then
yeah.
you go, then you iceberg that thing and you go,
Right.
oh man, we're barely making a drop.
Right.
And then you've got like really big organizations, like you've got like Feeding America,
Right.
who I believe they claim to recover about 4 billion pounds a year.
Okay.
So they're by and large like one of the,
Right.
the biggest name in that game, but that's still
not a lot.
less than that's a sub single digit percentage.
Yeah.
Like it's so small.
Yeah. But that is like really people need to understand this. This is like such a huge issue, that I mean, you rescuing 38 million pounds, which is a lot of food. 38 million pounds. If I would drop 38 million pounds of food in front of your house, you would not be happy. That's
No.
that's a lot of food.
No, and we actually just calculated recently,
Yeah.
as of this year, Food Rescue US has kept over 1 billion pounds of CO2 out of the atmosphere.
Wow.
And this is something I really hope your listeners can take to heart, because
Right.
one of the things that I get really anxious about when we talk about climate change and food insecurity and any of these like really big systemic issues,
Right.
is it's really easy as like just one person to be like, I'm just going to throw my hands
Sure.
up, right?
Yeah.
I can't what can I do? Wrong. Absolutely wrong. Because by any measure, Food Rescue US is a small nonprofit. Our annual budget is about $1.5 million.
Right.
We are a small organization, right? We've got about 15, full-time folks, including some of our site directors. And our little tiny organization based out of Stamford, Connecticut, granted, we've got a footprint all over the country now,
Mhm.
but in less than 15 years, we've kept over 1 billion pounds of CO2 out of the atmosphere.
Yeah.
That is a big deal.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
And
huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like
an
a
accumulation of a bunch of individuals,
Right.
right? It's the accumulation of your neighbor going to Trader Joe's in their, Honda Fit, filling up their trunk with rescued food, and you add that up times those other,
Yeah.
what did we say earlier, about 8,000 volunteers, and that turns into 38 million pounds a year
Yeah.
of food being rescued.
Yeah.
And not in landfills, but to people that need it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a huge investment on it's like a huge return of investment. If you so like you said, like 1.5 million is your annual budget. That's 10 years, so it's 50 million. But you like what 1 billion CO2 equivalents? That's what you were saying. That's a massive return on investment, in my opinion. I think that's
Oh, and on the food side, it is too. I mean, so our number as of right now is about, so for every dollar that we spend, we're providing about 16 meals
right.
to our social service agency
Right,
partners.
right.
So, and like, I don't know where you can feed 16 people for $1.
No, you can't. Yeah.
So it's and that's one of the parts of it, is this can be really efficient if it's done correctly, and it can make a remarkably outsized impact. Again, if done well.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the emphasis on like showing the opportunity that those problems come with, like I think that's a good way to do it. We're almost at the end, unfortunately, but Okay, I have a Star Trek question for you, and then I have
Okay.
the three questions at the end.
Yeah.
Unless you have like, if you have another question,
No,
I
no.
can. Can I have some of your coffee? My coffee is empty. Thank you.
If that helps you
So-
with your Star Trek.
I'm rescuing your coffee.
I would not let it go to waste anytime.
All right. So, uh, Star Trek is all about community. I think that's what I like about Star Trek. It's
Yes.
community is like the one thing that goes through all the Star Trek franchise. And we can edit this out if our editor doesn't like Star Trek, but we talk about it anyways. So, but in the Star Trek franchise, I know you don't like Star
I
Trek.
have no idea. I'll let you guys talk. I'm having
But
to listen
basically,
into- yeah.
the humanity has advanced like very far because they all work together, as you know, like not just like on planet Earth, but with all the other
Oh, that's a
races as
beautiful
well. Yeah, it's a
story.
beautiful story. It's a very beautiful story.
That's nerdy then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, so my question is, do you think that we will ever go to like the next stars with our Star Trek if we're not even able to solve our food waste problem? Or let me rephrase that question. Do you think that in a world of like we go with Jean-Luc Picard, you know, Earth will still have this food waste problem somehow? What's your take on that?
So, all right, I'm gonna get deep nerd on you really quick.
Yeah.
In the Star Trek universe,
Mhm.
right? The world had just gone through like a significant nuclear war, right?
Mhm.
And the war and the world was broken up into these tiny little factions of people, and we were still all killing each other and doing all this awful stuff. And one scientist, right?
Right,
Was
yeah.
able to come up with some version of a faster than light drive,
Right.
and that resulted in us being able to have first contact with a more intelligent species. So that's all to say that I think that if humanity, in my mind, has ever demonstrated its ability to do one thing, it's that when things get really, really bad, we're able to stop fighting and do something better. And there's myriad examples of that in history, right? And I think like right now we're in one of those periods, right? The world is and it's not just here in the United States where things are politically polarized and all those things. It's all of this is happening all over the world, right? There's a part of me that's a cynic, but there's a part of me that has to believe that in the face of something dire, that we will do better. And yeah, I don't think the type of advancements that we see in something like a Star Trek come without fixing some of this stuff. I don't know if you remember, but like in the Star Trek universe, like people don't like on Earth, people don't have money.
Mm-hmm.
There's no money. You can get credits, but like everyone has everything that they need all the time. That's the foundation. And I really do think that the more I look ahead, the more I think that's closer to how we're going to be. And maybe that's just because like if we're not, then why the hell am I doing the work that I'm doing? And why don't I just go and raise money for some venture capital firm and make a heck of a lot more money than I do now? But I have faith. I've got faith.
All right.
I've got faith.
Yeah, I love that. That's amen to that. That's I think,
And yeah, I've watched all the Star Trek movies. I know all. I mean, I'm all the way there.
yeah, yeah. When I was a kid, I took a caffeine. What is the caffeine pills? Like those little caffeine pills?
Are you supposed to do that as a
No, like it was. I had to steal it. Anyways.
kid? To watch the Star Trek?
Yeah. We did like a Star Trek night, and I had to stay awake.
Wow, dedicated.
Anyways, all right, we are at the end. Thanks for your time. A couple of things. First of all, the 1 out of 3 questions, everyone gets to answer those. You already made up your mind, but I do want to give you the options still. It's superpower, any myth, or anything that we didn't ask you but you want to get out. So those are the 3. You can choose one. You can also choose 2, really. It's up to you.
So like, if we did the myths, I would just hone in on what I said before about like the idea that you as one person can't actually affect change,
Yeah.
because that's not true.
Yeah.
You can. But I think I'm gonna stick with superpower. I'm gonna
All
stick
right.
with superpower.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is your superpower?
Do you need to like?
Do you
say
want?
the question?
All right. So if I had the power to change one thing, it would be instilling a meaningful sense of empathy in everybody.
Ooh, I love that. That's wow.
I don't think you can just wave a magic wand and make people kind, but if you could make people just shut up long enough to think about the person sitting next to them, the person across the room, the unhoused person they walk by on the street, the kid, whatever it is,
agreed.
I think that's been the root of, I think, some of the most important things I've done in my life. And if I could wave a magic wand, I would just make everybody a little bit more empathetic.
Yeah.
That's super awesome.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Which is like the most boring superpower ever.
I don't think
No,
so.
I-
I think this is like the best superpower ever. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that would fix a lot of problems.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. Cool, James. This was an absolute pleasure. I really loved this conversation. How can
Thank you guys for having me. This is really fun.
Yeah.
I honestly, I wasn't totally sure what to expect, but this was
me
really,
neither. Don't worry about it. we were doing this on the go here, but no, this was awesome. How can people reach you if people want to reach out to you? Like, do you want people to reach out to you first of all?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. We're at Food Rescue. Yes, we're always happy to make new friends. So you can visit our website, which is foodrescue.us, or you can email me directly, and that's J as in James, Hart, HART @foodrescue.us. Always happy to hear from folks, ask questions. Would love to tell you more about the work that we do, how you can help, how you can support our work, yeah, always happy to.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
It's been a great pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah.